going to take a few minutes to review our vocabulary words that we had earlier in today's lesson. The words and the definitions are found at the bottom of the page. Now notice, there are no questions that go with page 25. We're just going to read it and stop and discuss some things, but then we'll listen to page 26 and answer a question from there. So let's go back to our story and let's look at the bottom of page 25. Our two words are cynic and defiance. So a cynic is someone who always expects bad things to happen. Remember over here how Flora hated romance? You know, when I think of the good things in life, I think of romance. So she hates romance. So a good word to describe Flora would be a cynic. So that's what it says at the top of page 12. Flora's mother had often accused Flora of being a natural-born cynic. Flora suspected that this was true. Now, natural-born means nobody made her that way. She was just born being that way. She was born looking or expecting the bad things to happen. So Flora is not disagreeing with her mother about this. She said, yeah, I own it. I'm pretty much a negative person. I find the negative in things. She was a natural-born cynic who lived in defiance of contracts. And defiance is our other word. If you act in defiance, you know something's not allowed, but you do it anyway. In your last question, Flora's mother had reminded her that she had signed a contract saying that she would not read comic books, that she would read true literature. And we see that Flora didn't really care. She's going to keep on reading her comic books. She's going to ignore her mother. So that is an act of defiance. Hopefully on the last slide for your answer, you chose that Flora is defiant. Related words, same thing. It's just an adjective instead of a noun, a describing word. Flora is defiant. She knows something's not allowed, but she's going to do it anyway. So starting in paragraph 14, let's continue to read. Yep, thought Flora, that's me. She bent her head and went back to reading about the amazing incandesto. She was interrupted a few minutes later by a very loud noise. It sounded as if a jet plane had landed in the Tickums' backyard. Now let's stop and talk about that. A jet plane landing in your backyard would be a very loud noise. But if it was as loud as a jet plane landing in your backyard, you would have to have special headphones on, those noise-canceling headphones, because it would damage your hearing if it was really that loud. So that's an exaggeration. In reading, when an author exaggerates, that's called hyperbole. Hyperbole is like, I called you 1,000,000 times last night. No, you didn't really call them 1,000,000 times, but maybe you called them 10 or 15 times. Or if I say, I'm so hungry I could eat a whole horse. I couldn't probably eat that much meat. It'd make me sick if I did. But I'm exaggerating to show you just how hungry I am. So if it sounded as if a jet plane, it's not the same, but they're using that hyperbole to tell you it's really loud. Now look at paragraph 17. What the heck, said Flora. She got up from her desk and looked out the window and saw Mrs. Tickum running around the backyard with a shiny, oversized vacuum cleaner. Nothing out of the ordinary. Yes, you could take your vacuum cleaner outside and you could vacuum. Not very practical, but you could do it. It looked like she was vacuuming the yard. That can't be, thought Flora. Who vacuums their yard? Actually, it didn't look like Mrs. Tickum knew what she was doing. It was more like the vacuum cleaner was in charge. And the vacuum cleaner seemed to be out of its mind, or its engine, or something. So think about it. If we said a person is out of their mind, we'd be like, oh, they're cuckoo, oh, crazy. Well, a vacuum cleaner doesn't have a mind, doesn't have a brain. So Flora says maybe it's out of its engine, because the engine of a vacuum cleaner is what controls it. So she's like, something's wrong with that vacuum cleaner. And look, I've highlighted this sentence. Flora thinks, and she said it out loud, it's a few bolts shy of a load. Now, if I've heard people talk about other people and they say, she's not the sharpest tool in the shed, or she's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. And that's an idiom. Idioms are idiotic sayings. Like if I say it's raining cats and dogs outside, it's not really raining cats and dogs. It's just raining really hard. So if I say she's not the sharpest tool in the shed, I'm saying she's not that smart. So Flora thinks this vacuum cleaner is a few bolts shy of a load. It's missing some parts and it's not acting normally. It's not acting like it should. But look at paragraph 23. And then she saw that Mrs. Tickham and the vacuum cleaner were headed directly for a squirrel. Oh no, poor squirrel. Now remember all the way back to the beginning pages where we saw that squirrel, and we always knew that the squirrel was going to become a big part of this story, and now we know why. Okay, let's listen to page 26, and then you're going to answer your question. Let's just set a question that you should be listening for. What is something on this page, in the illustration, or in the text that lets you know this is a fantasy? We're bringing it right back to that essential question from slide 1. We know that a fantasy is a made-up story. It could never really happen. So what's something on this page as we read it that could never really happen? And it's loading. It's taking a minute. Well, I can't get it to read to us, so I guess I will continue reading. We're having some technical difficulties. At the top of the page, it says, "Hey now," said Flora. She banged on the window. "Watch out," she shouted. "You're going to vacuum up that squirrel." She said the words, and then she had a strange moment of seeing them hanging there over her head. "You're going to vacuum up that squirrel." Now remember, she loves to read comic books. So when she imagines herself in a comic book, she imagines her as the character, and those are the words in the bubble above her head. So her imagination, she's very creative. She's imagining this is a comic book playing out. There's just no predicting what kind of sentences you might say, thought Flora. For instance, who would ever think you would shout, "You're going to vacuum up that squirrel"? It didn't make any difference, though, what words she said. Flora was too far away. The vacuum cleaner was too loud. And also, clearly, it was bent on destruction. Okay, remember, destruction is related to destroy. It's clearly going to destroy something in that yard. "This malfeasance must be stopped," said Flora in a deep and superheroic voice. Now, boy, that is a big word, malfeasance. But guess what it means? Wrongdoing. If something's going on that's wrong, that's a malfeasance. So she says, this wrongdoing must be stopped. She's going to stop that vacuum cleaner. And she's imagining herself a superhero. So she said it in a deep and superheroic voice. Stop and pause this video and say, "This malfeasance must be stopped," in your best superheroic voice. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you did a great job with it. I'm sure you did. So again, in paragraph 31, it says, "This malfeasance must be stopped," was what the unassuming janitor, Alfred T. Slipper, always said before he was transformed, before he changed, into the amazing incandesto and became a towering, crime-fighting pillar of light. Boy, that's another big paragraph that we need to stop and talk about. You know how Superman is just a news reporter and then he goes into the telephone booth and he comes back out and he's Superman? Well, Alfred T. Slipper was a janitor. He cleaned a building, okay? And he would say when he saw something that was wrongdoing, when he saw something going wrong, a malfeasance, he would step away and he would change into a superhero called Incandesto. Remember, this is the character in our book over here, our comic book. And he became a towering, a larger-than-life, towering, huge, crime-fighting pillar of light. When we think of the good guys, we think of they're always wearing white. And we think of the bad guys, they're always wearing black. Well, a pillar of light makes me think light and lightness and white. So Alfred T. Slipper, or Incandesto, as he's known as his superhero name, is a good guy. Unfortunately, Alfred T. Slipper wasn't present. Where was Incandesto when you needed him? Not that Flora really believed in superheroes, but still, she stood at the window and watched as the squirrel was vacuumed up. Poof! Thump! Holy bagumba, said Flora. Now, we're going to stop there, go back to your question, and I want you to tell me that something that happens on this page that lets you know this story is a fantasy. Make sure you answer in a complete sentence. Make sure you put a capital letter at the beginning of your sentence, and make sure you put a period at the end. What is something that could never really happen in real life? This is the end of our story for today. Go on and finish with your formative assessment on the next slide, and then work on spelling patterns for your words. And then I'll be working with you again on your wacky shoes. We're starting our essay today. And then you'll have a lesson in Moby Max for grammar.